To start the year off, Kristen asked me if I would be the club's Rotary Foundation chair for the year. And I said I'd be happy to do that. And I thought there'd be no better way than to start the year off by giving everybody an overview as to what the Rotary Foundation is. And I've stolen a format that I saw done at Michigan PETS, President-elect's training, about a year ago, which is a panel discussion. So we have three people who I will introduce in just a moment, who are people who have been affected in their lives or have helped affect other people's lives in a positive way through the work of the Rotary Foundation. So they're each going to tell you a little bit about their own personal little story. So rather than big kind of theoretical examples, there'll be very specific examples as to how the Rotary Foundation changes lives. I wanted to, though, provide just a very high overview as to what the Rotary Foundation does. The mission of the Rotary Foundation is to enable Rotarians to advance world understanding, goodwill, and peace through the improvement of health, and supportive education, and the alleviation of poverty. And the key thing in there is what the Rotary Foundation does is enables Rotarians to do these things. So it's clubs and individual Rotarians in those clubs who get these things done. Every charitable foundation, almost always, has a variety of funds that they raise money for. The Rotary Foundation is no different. A typical structure would be a charitable foundation would have an annual programs fund, which funds the majority of the types of things it does on a day-to-day basis. It would have restricted giving funds, where people provide donations for very specific things and they can't be used for anything else. We actually have that in our Clubs Foundation. Tony will raise money and it'll be donated to our Clubs Foundation for donation to the programs that he works with in Uganda. That's a restricted donation. And then there are endowment funds. Sometimes foundations will have capital funds. Well, the Rotary Foundation is very similar. It has the annual programs fund, and that's what we're going to talk about today. It also has restricted giving funds like Polio Plus. We all know about that. Every club is asked to donate a minimum of $2,000 to that fund every year to help the work of eradicating polio. And if that happens, and it will, by the next June comes around, we will have exceeded the $200 million, is that the right number, that Rotary clubs have had to raise over 3 years to meet the challenge grant from the Gates Foundation, who gave us $350 million. The humanitarian grants programs. When our club makes a donation later this year for the Bolivia prosthetics project, that's a restricted donation to the Rotary Foundation. It can only be used for that project. There are disaster relief funds. One was set up not long ago for the Japan earthquake relief. So if you donate to that, those funds can only be used for projects related to that. And the peace centers also have their own fund. And then there's a permanent fund at the Rotary Foundation, which Jamie would be happy to tell you about, because she's actually raises money for that fund, where Rotarians can leave money in their wills or a variety of different estate planning programs, or just make major gifts. But we're here today to talk about the annual programs fund, which has two types of programs. Educational programs, which comprise about a third of the money that's given spent on the educational programs, and humanitarian grant programs. We're going to talk about 3 of the 5 programs. We're going to talk about the ambassadorial scholarships and the Rotary, or the Peace scholarships, and we're going to talk about international matching grants. I skipped over group study exchange because our club's very familiar with that program. Pat O'Day was a team leader to France a couple of years ago. Last fall, we sponsored Deborah Bloom as an outbound member to South Africa, and our club was always involved in hosting inbound teams. So we're well familiar with that. The District Simplified grants fund local projects. We've gotten, I think, 5 $1,000 grants over the last 3 years for our coach programs and our food packing project and our dictionary project. So we're going to start with ambassadorial scholarships, which provide scholarships for a year of study abroad as ambassadors of goodwill to improve international understanding. In the last year that was reported, I think the 09-10 year, 710 scholars from 52 countries studied in 33 countries. And there will be 4 scholars from our district studying next year. And John Moore from Winnetka just finished a year of study at the London School of Economics, which was entirely paid for by the Rotary Foundation. And we didn't have to pay a penny for it, even though we sponsored. We nominated John. To tell you about her experience as a Rotary ambassadorial scholar, Jamie Rivard, who also works at the Rotary Foundation now, is going to tell you about her experience. And she's a neighbor. She grew up in Wilmette.
I did. Thanks very much, Rachel. Very nice of you to invite me here. And greetings. Hi, my name is Jamie Reward, and I am thrilled to be here today. And this is what a great intro, because I wish every Rotary Club did this, and that every Rotary Club had that kind of involvement with the Rotary Foundation that this club is clearly doing. So thanks for doing that. It's great when I even meet Rotarians that can differentiate polio restricted gift from annual programs fund gift, and it just helps because it makes my life easier. I do work at the Rotary Foundation headquarters now in Evanston, and I think I can speak for all ambassadorial scholars everywhere at saying that that program and any program at the Rotary Foundation winds up changing people's lives forever and in ways that they don't necessarily think about when they first get the scholarship. So yes, I grew up in Wilmette. I went to Regina Dominican High School. I went to the University of Notre Dame. When I graduated, I really didn't have a too creative concept of what I wanted to do with my life, and I happened to work at a landscape architecture firm at 1563 Sherman Avenue, which just coincidentally happens to be directly across the street from the Rotary Foundation headquarters. So I happened upon a newspaper article in the Wilmette Life about the Rotary Foundation Ambassadorial Scholarship, and I followed the directions and I applied for that, and I like to say they had a weak applicant pool that year, clearly, because I was really, really shocked and surprised to be chosen for that scholarship. So I was sponsored by the Rotary Club of Wilmette Harbor, the Wilmette Sunrise Club, and this really was, I look at it as like the first year of the rest of my life. It was like when my life got interesting was when Rotary found me and plucked me out of obscurity and said, go do something, we'll give you the money, and go do something interesting. And I just hadn't thought of doing that before. I grew up in a family that just didn't, international travel was not part of my childhood, put it that way. And I wanted to study overseas. I'd just kind of never taken the initiative to do it, and Rotary gave me the kick in the butt that I needed and the money that I needed to go and study in Scotland. So I spent 1 year in Scotland. One of the great things about the Ambassadorial Scholarship, I'm sure, if you haven't heard from, is it John Moore that you said? Has he addressed your club yet?
Not yet.
Hopefully he will. One of the great things about this particular program, in my opinion, is the emphasis on public speaking, that it requires all scholars to address the Rotary clubs in the countries that they visit or where they live for their year of study. And then they again have to come back and kind of pay for their Rotary scholarship by addressing Rotary audiences in their own home, in their sponsoring country and area, to tell them about their experiences. And I laugh because when I started at Rotary, I was a scholarship coordinator, and I worked with scholars who studied all over the world, and you'll hear from another one that I actually kind of worked with peripherally anyway. And you'll have a kid that's like going to go study in Tanzania, and they're like, their biggest fear is the public speaking part. And you're kind of like, you've got bigger problems on your hands. But that's what they're scared about. And it's just, and so to me, I'm really, really thankful that Rotary emphasizes this so much, because I think you'll all agree that having that ability to sit in front of a room of people and speak clearly and eloquently is a skill that will never harm you in your career for the rest of your life, and something that you're happy to have. But Rich asked me to just briefly let you know I only have a few minutes because you have other wonderful speakers you're going to hear from, but it was a great lesson that he asked me to just say, how did this impact your life? And so as I was riding my bike to work this morning from Old Town, I thought to myself, how did it impact my life? And I think the fact that I was riding to work, it's a long, I won't go into it, but that in itself is something that I think happened to be due to me getting this scholarship. So I just kind of quickly wrote down 5 things that I thought that I learned and that have impacted me to this day because I was an ambassadorial scholar. And the first one is what I call the paradox of knowledge. The more you know you don't know. When I went to Scotland and I lived in a house with 45 students from all over the world, I was the only American, and I realized that I really didn't know where countries were, or like how other people lived, or what were like customs in other countries, what foods did they eat, and I had to sit and cook in a kitchen with a woman from Nigeria and a guy from from Cyprus, countries that I couldn't identify on a map that I learned quickly about, and I just realized how little I knew about the world and geography and politics and all sorts of stuff. So that was great. Secondly, I thought when I graduated from college, I really thought that I would try to acquire stuff, and that would make me a good, citizen, and that I would just collect things. And I realized after that scholarship that to me it was more important to fill my life with people and experiences rather than things. And I think the fact, like I said, I was riding my bike to work this morning, and I live downtown in a tiny little condo, and I work in not-for-profit, is not at all what I envisioned for myself before I got this scholarship. So I really think that it kind of turned my whole life in a different direction. It taught me to be an ambassador every day. The Ambassadorial Scholarship teaches you to represent Rotary and your country when you're overseas, and a lot of times you might be the only person who represents either of those entities. And I feel like I developed a really valuable skill to always see things from multiple points of view, and to realize that you might be the only one that somebody needs from your background. And so as I ride my bike to work, I always try to think of cars on the road, and that when I'm driving a car, they don't really like bikes, and there's a reason for that, because when I drive a car, I might not like bikes either. I always try to really think about what the other entity might think of me, and vice versa, to make the world a little better place. Fourth, appreciate how lucky I am to come from where I come from, and the freedoms that I enjoy as an American. I really, again, I feel so lucky to live in a place where the roads are so easy to ride on, and where I have great public transportation, and I, as a woman, can wear shorts and walk around and just be comfortable in my skin. And I know, having lived with people from all over the world, that not everyone has all of those opportunities, and the Ambassadorial Scholarship taught me that. And then finally, this is going back to the Rotary Foundation, and it's the Rotary Foundation that made this possible. You are all Rotarians, and you're members of your Rotary Club, and the Rotary Club is a member of Rotary International. And then Rotary Foundation is the charitable arm of that entity. And what I like to say is that the Rotary Foundation takes cool people and gives them the opportunity to become more cool, because they expose people to ideas and to projects and to problems that are not in our everyday point of view, and they make people connect with other people and make the world a better place. I know I only had 5 or 6 minutes. Hopefully that covers it in a nutshell. Thank you very much, and I'll take questions at the end.
Yes. Excellent. Well, thank you, Jamie.
You're welcome.